Inside the voters' roll for the Tlokwe by-elections, the IEC was unable to provide verifiable addresses for some 4,000 voters. Yesterday, all parties agreed that the upcoming municipal elections must not be postponed.
For a closer look into this matter, we are now joined via Skype by legal analyst Brenda Wardle. Good evening, Brenda, and thank you so much for joining us. Now, what did you make of the arguments at the Crown Court? It appears the court may be faced with a difficult task of balancing the law and the interests of the country ahead of the elections in a few months' time.
Yes, good evening, and good evening to the viewers. It's going to be a very difficult one, and we do know that the Constitutional Court has to rule urgently, so that judgment needs to be out sooner rather than later. Because if we just take a quick look back to the amendment of the Act in 2003, there has been undue delay and dilatoriness on the part of the Independent Electoral Commission to get the issue of the verification of the addresses sorted out. But if we step aside a little bit and go back to the judgment of the Constitutional Court last year, where the 5 independent candidates who described themselves as a loose coalition united against corruption, I think is what they called themselves, where they actually approached the Constitutional Court to set aside or to review a decision of the Electoral Court. And indeed, the Constitutional Court condoned the late filing, and a lot of irregularities which were in the papers, both on the side of the IEC and of the applicants themselves, and ruling that the elections of August and September in 2013 were not free and fair. And that had to do with demarcation and people who had not been verified. Now, if we look at the August elections that are upcoming, my suspicion is that they might have to be postponed. Yes, the political parties can be up in arms and say, well, the elections shouldn't be postponed, but given the current mess with the verification of these addresses and a credible voters' roll amid previous allegations of fraud and people who did not live in the area, it is quite a complex scenario, and it's a difficult decision that the Constitutional Court has to make.
Now, Brenda, just bearing that in mind, and what the IEC is saying, that it's impossible for them to verify the addresses of close to about 18 million people in such a short period of time. You've just mentioned that it is a difficult position. Could this sway the court?
Well, it might actually persuade the court. The court might reluctantly have to agree with the IEC, even though there's nothing that has to be done. The legislation has to be complied with. There's no question or doubt about that. The right to exercise the vote, I think if we go back to a very, very important Constitutional Court decision a couple of years ago with Pearl Veronica Mabuto arguing and Judge Albie Sachs, Constitutional Court Justice Albie Sachs, saying that the right to vote is central to our democracy. Universal adult suffrage is very, very important. So, and we cannot gloss over the errors that have been made by the IEC, and something needs to happen. And we can't just vote for the sake of voting. The IEC has said that should the Constitutional Court rule that they need to verify those addresses, then it's going to take them approximately 4 years to essentially verify all those addresses. And that is quite a long time, and the political parties are going to be aggravated.
Now, Brenda, how is it possible that people do not have addresses?
Most of the problems, and there's another aspect to this argument which was raised in the Constitutional Court about the right to privacy. If we look at the Protection of Personal Information Act, I am personally concerned about the fact that our addresses need to be given to political parties. We are inundated, and I think Chief Justice Mogoeng incorrectly, in my view, argued that he even receives on a monthly basis SMSs from ladies. That is the reason why the legislature wanted to put in place the Protection of Personal Information Act. The second thing is the squalor and the informal settlements, and the fact that people move into informal settlements on an irregular basis, some of them on a regular basis, and some of them not even having allocated addresses. For example, if you go and you put up a shack in an informal settlement tomorrow, it's going to take some time before the councillor comes and allocates you a number for that particular shack. So the dynamics, as I said, it's not easy, it's complex, and many people are without formal residences. Obviously, Stats SA could assist, but even in that regard, it's going to be very difficult, given also our migratory patterns. That I'm from the Eastern Cape and I live and I'm ordinarily resident in Johannesburg. Where is it that I should actually cast my vote? So those are the difficult circumstances which face the court.
Now, is it correct to say that the absence of addresses does not mean that the voters' roll is flawed, especially with the IEC emphasizing that it was only required to record addresses from the end of 2003?
Yes, they were, and 2003 was quite a long time ago. But to their credit, the 2015 judgment of the Constitutional Court, on which they now seek a clarity in interpretation, which in my view is superfluous, that judgment is clear. It's not retrospective. In effect, it is prospective. So the IEC does have an argument in that regard, that the Constitutional Court spelled it out clearly in its order last year, that certain orders in that judgment would only be applicable prospectively rather than retroactively.
Now, Brenda, talk to us about the argument by independent candidates. Is there an argument perhaps suggesting that the lack of addresses can be a creation of ghost voters or that sort of thing?
It is. I mean, there was evidence, even though not concrete evidence, but of course there has been meddling. And elections in South Africa, and I say this without fear, even if we go back, and that is why Home Affairs has such a big problem with non-South African nationals participating, because with the first general free elections in South Africa, people were encouraged, and it was so easy to go and get an ID document in order for you to vote. Political parties were canvassing very, very viciously for people to go and register. So it was easy for people to get South African identity documents in that way. Now, it is obviously irregular to bus people from point A to point B, if indeed that is true, because when it comes to municipal elections, the demarcation is very, very important. The ward under which you fall is also of critical importance.
Now, Brenda, it's unclear when the court will hand down judgment. What's your sense here? How long do you think the Court will take to apply its mind on this issue?
I think they're going to come back within the next 7 to 14 days, because this is a very, very important matter. It is indeed urgent, and clarity is needed in this regard. But I suspect that there are going to be very many unhappy people immediately that judgment basically comes out.
Brenda, we have to leave it there for now. Thank you so much for joining us. That was legal analyst Brenda Wardle joining us via Skype to share her views on the pending Court matter regarding the addresses of voters in the voters' roll. We take a short break now. We're back with a recap of tonight's headlines.